Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm excited to be here today for another episode of the InsurTech Leadership Podcast with Sashia Godet. She is the VP of Product at MTech Group. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you for having me, Joshua. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, maybe you could just start giving us a little bit about your background and maybe telling us a bit about MTech as well.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm VP of Product at MTech. I've been with the company since its inception. In terms of my background, I've spent most of my career in product management, business analysis. Started out in capital markets. So, I did a lot of product development for the compliance and regulatory teams. So, building solutions that help them meet their regulatory requirements, especially after Dodd-Frank was instituted. So that's where I spent a lot of my career, let's say about a decade. And then in the last 2 to 3 years, I transitioned into the insurance space with MTech Group. And I've been focusing on building our product out, QMT, into what it is today, and also looking at where we can transition into new markets in the future. In terms of MTech, we are a software development company. We focus on QA software for insurance today. Our concept in terms of our product is a model-based testing software, so we're quite different from other solutions that are out there in the market. But um, we were pretty much bred out of working alongside a large carrier, finding out what their pain points were, and sort of customizing a solution for them. And then we took that idea, made it more general, and we've put it into a product that we've released to the market called QMT.
Got it. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on sort of what that distinction is between your solution and how other QA solutions typically are
Sure.
um, packaged?
Yeah. So I guess testing solutions can range from anything if it includes automation, test scripts. It can be a lot of solutions use AI, which we do as well. But what we don't see a lot of is model-based testing. And what that is a lot of carriers, insurtechs, they have a business flow, whether that is an agent logging into a portal to begin an illustration for a prospective client, then going on to filling out an e-application, and then to underwriting and policy admin. If the application is accepted, that's considered a workflow or a journey. And there are different ways to attack testing for that sort of workflow. Some create scripts, which have to be changed every time there's a change in the workflow, but we actually represent that workflow in our solution as a model. And that model can be reviewed by the person doing the testing, a business analyst, someone in product or business, and they can actually see that business flow, understand it. And then in the back end, what our solution does is automatically generate test cases for the user based on that model. And so the user isn't actually creating test cases or creating test scripts. Their focus is on just defining their business process in our software, and then we take care of the test cases and the execution of those test cases on the back end.
Got it. And so what additional benefits does that, provide to the client?
What we hear a lot is faster time to market in terms of product releases because you're not sitting there spending time in your development cycle building the actual test scripts. They find that they're able to get their test cases faster, execute them sooner, find out where the issues are, fix them, and then go to market. So that's one of the main, I guess, benefits that we get from responses that we get from our customers when we ask them, or just our value proposition in terms of what we sort of drive as one of the main reasons why you should get our product.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so what about the process of sort of taking a product that's built for one client and then, scaling that to be something you can use with multiple clients?
Yeah. I mean, I guess in our case, we're in a unique position in that whenever you start any product, you need to do some market research. You need to understand what your prospective clients would want in a solution. We were lucky in that we were working alongside a carrier where we saw those issues and those pain points being manifested, and we were able to get sort of that market research live. And because of that, we were able to construct something that in the beginning, although it was geared to that particular customer, when we went and validated our ideology in the market, we found out that a lot of carriers are experiencing the same thing. And then when we started talking to insurtechs, we also figured out that they are facing the same thing because they're building products for these carriers. So our, I guess, initiation was a bit different because we got that market research live by working with a customer, but we were able to validate that idea with our beta version of our product by sort of talking to other carriers, talking to insurtechs in the market to validate that the problem that we were solving here also exists with other companies in the market.
And is the way the product is used the same for an insurtech versus a carrier, or in different lines of business? Is it pretty standardized, or um, are there different sort of versions depending on the audience?
It is one version. The difference really that we see between insurtechs and carriers is just the volume of testing that they're doing. So carriers, they typically, they have their life products, their annuity products, and it's just for that one customer as a carrier. But as a distributor or even an insurtech that's building these solutions for multiple customers, they're often doing a lot of customization for each of their customers. And that means that they have to test each customer individually. And so that's really the main difference. We find that they're doing a lot more testing and they're having to create a lot more workflows that represent each of their customers that they're deploying their products to.
And so, in terms of your own experience in product management and your approach to it or philosophies around it, are there certain principles that you applied to developing this and continue to apply as you move it forward?
Yeah, I think the key thing is getting as accurate as you can research and input from the market, and continuing to refine your product based on that input. So we started with feedback from the market, and we continually talk to customers, to prospects, and we hear different things that is now more important now than it may have been 6 months ago when we talked to them. So I think the key principle that I follow when it comes to product management is always keeping your ear to the ground, making sure that your product is a fit for what customers need today. Although the product life cycle doesn't happen overnight and you can't, change your product every day to adjust to customers' needs, being aware of how those needs are changing and factoring that into your product is important because it makes sure that your product is relevant and it's meeting where companies are sort of moving towards.
And are there typical, milestones or gates that you'd look at in a product development process?
Yes. So first is requirements gathering. So that can be market research, talking to other persons in the space, getting that into documented material that's then sort of further refined into technical requirements that are shared with an engineering team, getting feedback from engineering, because as much as product is front facing, talking to clients and prospective clients, the how of those requirements is also important because you want to make sure that the architecture is sound and stable, that it can scale with different customers. So that technical step is important. And then, going into development, making sure that you are as agile as possible. I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but making sure that you're iteratively releasing portions of your product to make sure that each component, meets meets what you're looking for rather than doing that big bang, realizing at the end that this isn't really what you wanted and having to go back to the drawing board. So, really spending time in research, requirements, refining the how, and then getting into those iterative development cycles so that you can get that feedback in smaller chunks, and then at the end having a product that's as close to what you designed as possible.
So do you find that's like one of the biggest places where product teams stumble as they sort of try to operate in chunks that are too big, or are there other areas where they typically you see stumble between prototype and launch?
Um, I think sometimes where the most challenge resides is in the how, because maybe it can be for a number of reasons. Maybe the architecture that you have today doesn't facilitate, the requirements that you're looking to incorporate into the product, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so you get into development and you realize, oh, we thought we could do this way, but it works out that it's not compatible, so you have to take a step back, figure that out, maybe change requirements even because the architecture just doesn't facilitate it, or to make that change would, elongate the timeline by weeks or even months. So a lot of the challenges sometimes happens in implementation, I would say. That's the best way of describing it. Um, and then sometimes the challenge can be you've built the product that you think people want, and it turns out that their needs have changed since you spoke to them and then delivered something. So that can also be a challenge as well in the cycle of product delivery.
And how do you determine when a product's actually kind of ready versus needs more iteration?
That's a good question. So, in terms of like software development, the software is never complete, as I like to
Right.
say. But there is a minimum viable product MVP that we always aim to hit, and that is really your threshold for, do we release this version or we don't. So in the design phase, the requirements phase, you have a version of a solution that you want, and then as you go through the implementation, you sort of make negotiations of what can be done, what can't be done based on where we are and timelines and how that changes, and then you sort of make decisions based on that. And at the end of that sort of give and take, you get to a product that you consider is minimum viable product. So it has the main features that you require. It may not have all the bells and whistles that you originally wanted, but it works functionally, covers 80% of the requirements that you first started out with. And that usually is my barometer for, do we go or not. Obviously it has to work. So not, I shouldn't say not work 100%, but you're never going to get perfect. And so we strive for close to perfect, make decisions on what will be considered day two that we can live without for the time being. And then, once that assessment is made, then we sort of go with that minimum viable product and then add to it post release as part of our enhancements.
So you mentioned, the connection with engineering and working with engineering,
Yeah.
but in terms of other types of cross-functional, um, communication and interaction in order to bring a product to market, can you speak to some of the other key links that
Yeah.
are critical and the role
Yeah.
product management plays in that?
Yeah, so product marketing and marketing are the cross-functional roles that are important, especially as we get closer to launch dates. It's important that we craft messaging that aligns with the features of the product, um, and then also, putting it out in a way that's going to catch the user's attention, but also gives them enough detail to pique their interest, if they're sort of on the fence about, is this is this a value add to me or not? So, product marketing and marketing are two groups that I spend a lot of time with as we get closer to any launches that we have, because they're sort of the mouthpiece for the organization. They're responsible for, advertising what we have and making sure that it's positioned in the correct light. And my job working alongside them is to make sure they have all of the functional material in terms of describing the product accurately to put out there.
And in terms of, ideating and being innovative in a highly regulated industry like insurance, do you have any advice for people as to how to approach that, whether they're trying to do it on their own or do it in conjunction with potential customers?
Yeah, I must admit the insurance space moves. It moves, but it almost appears to move slowly. And it's a very risk averse industry for obvious reasons, highly regulated, as you mentioned. But I think there is a desire to sort of be more innovative in this space. People, when I go to conferences and talk to people, there is a desire. Obviously, they have the baggage of, archaic systems, mainframes, blue screens that they're sort of working their way out of. But there is that desire. So whenever we talk AI with customers, like, they're interested. They're still exploring themselves how best to incorporate those ideas. But I think every company expects some level of like next gen capabilities in a software that they're purchasing. And so it hasn't been difficult. Like, we haven't had any pushback from a lot of the organizations, because there is that desire. I think the challenge is that they're figuring out how do they sort of make the move to the next step. And so we're sort of alongside with them rather than saying, hey, just use AI and let it do everything. We're sort of working alongside them and say, hey, we want to we want to help you use AI, but human in the loop. So
Mhm.
bring it totally over to the AI, but you have points of validation that you can say, hey, yes, I want to use this output. No, I don't want to use it. So they sort of feel more comfortable that they're not doing all of the work, but they're sort of doing the validation portion. And that's been getting good feedback as well. So not so much of a challenge. The challenge is more on the implementation side. How do they take AI or any forward-thinking functionalities and incorporate it into their current infrastructure? I think that's where the challenge lies.
And are there other, areas that you find particularly interesting around like what the future of QA is going to look like, or just, what the future of product development will look like more broadly, as, AI becomes more and more ubiquitous and
Yeah.
the kind of more widely used?
I think in a lot of roles, AI may, and I say may because we don't know definitively still, it's still sort of a gray area, but I think AI will get to a point where it will be able to do a lot of the manual, repetitive, operational tasks in QA or even product development. And I think where we're going to have to pivot as persons in that space is to hone our skills in the area that AI doesn't do. So writing requirements documents. I think if you give prompts to an AI, they can help you document what you have in your mind. But what it doesn't have is sort of the additional analysis that needs to go into the information to sort of, you know, bring things together, that analytical side of it, or even that relationship side of it. Those are things that I think the AI will not be able to do, at least not in the short term. So I think in both spaces, pivoting to sort of tweak your skills to work in conjunction with output that AIs may produce, rather than sort of being combative and trying to do the same thing. Because I think a lot of operational tasks can be expedited with the use of AI, but some analytical and cross-functional things may still require user input. And I think that's where, in both spaces, you focus your skill on and make sure that you add that value on top of the output that an AI can provide to you.
And if, someone has an idea for a product but doesn't necessarily have a background like yours, and wants to work with, product developers or product managers in building something, how can they make your life easier? What's the ideal working process, look like to increase the odds of success?
If someone has an idea, I think beyond the idea, they should have some additional ideas of how they want that product or thing to work, who their target market is. So sort of help narrow down the search of, where we are starting from. So what market, what target audience, um, in a few words, how you expect this product to work. And then I think once you have that bare bones, then you can sort of flesh it out. But if you just have an idea, you're not sure where to go, it's not impossible, but I think it's going to require some research. So having the idea and doing some research upfront on those key things, market, audience, how exactly you envision it working, those are some essential things to start, and then you can kind of flesh out the idea from there.
Got it. Is there anything specific about, MTech's product roadmap, or where you're looking to enhance the QA solution that you can talk about?
Sure. I think I spent most of the time talking about our core product QMT, but through all of my product development activities, we've talked to customers and prospects, and we've added a couple of key areas to our product since we first launched a few years back. So XML validation is something that came out of direct feedback from our customers. So in addition to validating the workflow that I described earlier, also validating the data that gets transmitted throughout the workflow. So think of data moving from an e-application to an underwriting system. That data is usually in the form of an XML file, especially for life. The Accord 103 is a quite common XML that people hear about, and we validate the contents of those XML files vis-a-vis its original source, which is the e-application or the illustration. And so that came from feedback from customers and prospects, because what they were finding is that their NIGO rates, not in good order, was climbing higher. And when you looked into the root cause, the data was not correct. And so identifying those pitfalls before it gets to underwriting is important. And so that's what our XML validation does. And then PDF validation is a similar thing. So that came from feedback from customers and prospects that, hey, today with our QA, we're doing entirely manual validation of our PDFs. We're holding up one PDF against another, looking at it to see visually if it looks the same, and then looking at the content. And that doesn't allow for a lot of coverage. And so we automated that validation of the PDFs that are generated in the workflow vis-a-vis the original source of the data. And so those are two things that are direct results of conversations with the market and finding out what their needs are. Beyond that, we have an extensive roadmap to build out the rest of our product. We introduced AI into our product this year, and we have plans of making more aggressive changes as it relates to AI in our product. And just continuing to build on what we currently have. I can't share exact specifics, but it's really driven by where we see the market going, and then needs that we're hearing from customers, whether we go to conferences and we talk to prospective customers, or we join panels and we hear what are they talking about, like what are their key pain points that we're hearing quite often, and so we factor that into what comes next in our roadmap. But definitely lots of AI and adding to features that we currently have.
Can you share if it's like more sort of generative AI, agentic AI, other things, or not right now?
It's more the latter. That's what we're looking into right now.
Got it. Okay. So is there, one particularly like maybe hard lesson along the way in your product, or your career as a product leader that maybe improved your judgment or has kind of focused your approach or your methodology to product development?
Good question. I think what sort of honed my skills over the years is sort of thinking of the what if. So you design something and you think about what you want it to do, but sometimes you often don't think about what can happen beyond what you wanted to do. So I think sort of being pragmatic, thinking about all the possible scenarios, even the ones that you don't want for the product, and making sure that those are addressed. Because I've had releases where I've thought through designs, we've implemented it the way that it's been designed, but we didn't think of this thing or we didn't think of that thing. So I think that's something that I've learned through experience and lots of rollouts, that you always think about, I wanted to do this, but what if someone does something else? Because we're never at our customer screen sitting and watching what they're doing. We give them guides and we tell them to do it in this way, but they can do it in a completely different order, and we should know what the expected behavior is. It shouldn't blow up in their faces. So just thinking about what ifs is something that I've learned, and I also always put into practice to ensure that users have a good experience with any solution that we deploy.
So Sashia, this has been an interesting conversation. Anything else you'd like to share about the product or MTech or just in general before we wrap up?
I want to thank you for the opportunity. It's been great chatting to you about all things product, QA, and sort of giving you a bit more information about our company, MTech. Yeah, I would say look out for MTech in the insurance space. We've been doing a lot of great things, partnering with a lot of great companies. And if any of your listeners are out there looking for a QA solution, I think you should, reach out to us. We're available on all platforms. We have a website, Twitter, Instagram. So I would encourage your listeners to, check us out online. And yeah, I think I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. It's been great. And I hope, your listeners found this session informative.
Yeah, great. Well, Sashia Godet, VP of Product at MTech Group, thanks so much for joining me.